There's a strange moment that happens about halfway through Breaking Bad. Walter White, former high school chemistry teacher turned meth kingpin, has done some truly unforgivable things by this point. He poisoned a child, watched Jane die, even manipulated Jesse like a sociopathic father figure, and yet, somehow, when he stares down his enemies with that ice-cold line, "I'm the one who knocks," everyone cheers. But why do we root for Walter White, even as his sins stack up like the bodies in his wake? Why do we light candles at the altar for Tony Soprano, a man who lies, cheats, kills, and doesn't feel the slightest pang of regret until it's about his mother? Why do we fall in love with anti-heroes, the morally ambiguous characters who do bad things, often for the wrong reasons, and yet seem to demand our sympathy, admiration, and sometimes even our loyalty? Well, let's talk about Tony Soprano, a mob boss who orders hits like most of us order takeout. He cheats on his wife, abuses his power, manipulates his therapist, and kills without remorse. And yet, everyone rallied. Tony Soprano became iconic not in spite of his villainy, but somehow because of it. The paradox lies in how David Chase constructed him. You see, Tony is a charming and funny guy who loves animals and ducks and his kids. And when you spend time with a character like Tony, week after week, something strange happens. You start to see the world through his eyes. Empathy, it turns out, is dangerously malleable. Let's not pretend we would defend Tony or Walter if they were real. In real life, we would be horrified. But fiction does something sneaky. It puts us in the character's shoes, then invites us to walk a mile. Walter White is introduced to us as a desperate man diagnosed with cancer, undervalued, trying to leave something behind for his family. Tony Soprano opens his story in a therapist's office, wrestling with anxiety and the legacy of a toxic upbringing. We see their pain before we see their crimes, and that's the trick. These stories give us context before consequence, so when Walter lies or Tony kills, we've already bought into their inner world. We justify and rationalize their actions like they didn't have a choice. This is what makes them so compelling. They manipulate us just as easily as they manipulate everyone around them, and we let them. There's something else too, something we don't always want to admit. We like watching people break the rules, especially if they look like they're winning. Walter White becomes a kingpin. Tony Soprano commands a room with a look. They are powerful, decisive, and untouchable. Everything many of us are not in our daily lives. And in a world that often feels chaotic and unfair, watching someone take control, even in horrible ways, can feel weirdly satisfying. Tony doesn't worry about taxes or parking tickets. Walter doesn't panic when the printer jams. They live outside the lines, and fiction gives us a safe space to fantasize about that freedom without having to face the consequences. Watching Walter evolve from a meek schoolteacher to Heisenberg is thrilling. Watching Tony juggle the dual lives of suburban dad and ruthless boss is extremely fascinating. But perhaps the most unsettling reason we love anti-heroes like Tony Soprano is that they reflect parts of us we don't want to look at too closely. Tony's impulsiveness, his jealousy, his hunger for respect and control, these are not foreign to us. They're exaggerated, yes, but they reveal something true. Maybe you've never choked a man to death while eating spaghetti, but you have probably held a grudge, made a shady decision, or fantasized about telling someone to go to hell and walking away without guilt. These characters allow us to explore moral gray areas without getting our hands dirty. They become outlets for suppressed desires, frustrations, and questions. What would you do if no one was watching? How far would you go if pushed? Tony Soprano never pretends to be a good man, and that's oddly satisfying. There's a cultural theory that says the rise of the anti-hero reflects our disillusionment with traditional authority and black and white morality. The more we see corruption in politics, injustice in systems, and hypocrisy in institutions, the more we resonate with these characters. Maybe because perfect ethics don't exist. Meanwhile, the Walter White effect isn't just about Walter. It's about a new kind of storytelling, and in many ways, it began with Tony Soprano. Before Tony, TV was full of cops and cowboys, doctors and detectives. After Tony, we got Don Draper, Dexter Morgan, Frank Underwood, Villanelle, Tommy Shelby, and Walter White. All complex, all morally compromised, all wildly beloved. And in each case, we don't just watch them, we root for them. Even as they drag others down, we hope they'll claw their way up. Even when they lose their souls, we want them to win. It's confusing, intoxicating, and deeply revealing, but it goes deeper than this. There's a moment in Deadpool where our red-suited, trigger-happy anti-hero cuts a man's head off, makes a joke about it, and then saunters off to George Michael's careless whisper. Blood is everywhere, morality is nowhere, and the audience are cheering with laughter. Let's be real, Deadpool is not a role model. He swears like a sailor, shoots first, then apologizes later. He's a mercenary, a walking HR violation, and the guy most likely to ruin a child's birthday party by turning it into a chaotic, explosion-filled escape room. And yet we love him. We don't just tolerate Deadpool, we root for him. We show up in droves for his movies, buy his merchandise, and quote his filthiest one-liners. He breaks every rule in the superhero handbook, and somehow ends up more beloved than most caped crusaders. And what's the deal? If Walter White showed us how we could empathize with a descent into darkness, Deadpool proves there's another path to our hearts. Firstly, let's start with the obvious. Deadpool is fun. He's the party crasher of the superhero world. The guy who walks into the MCU with a fart joke and an Uzi. His violence is cartoonish and his cruelty is wrapped in comedy. He doesn't just kill people, he narrates it, dances through it, mocks it as it happens. And in doing so, he flips the emotional weight of brutality into a kind of gleeful spectacle. It's not about glorifying violence, it's about laughing at its absurdity. Unlike Walter White, whose transformation makes us question our own moral compass, Deadpool doesn't ask us to wrestle with anything that deep. He's not pretending to be a good guy. He's not looking for redemption. He's just having a damn good time and inviting us along for the ride. And let's be honest, who doesn't want to see a guy in a skin-tight red suit do a slow-motion flip while flipping the bird? And here's where things get more interesting. Deadpool is real, not in the sense that his actions are grounded in moral logic, but because he's one of the only characters who refuses to wear a metaphorical mask. While most heroes are sculpted into clean-cut PR-approved idols, Deadpool is brutally hilariously honest. He knows he's a fictional character, so he mocks the movie tropes, pokes fun at the studio budget, and talks directly to the audience. This character includes us and lets us in on the joke, and in doing so, he makes us feel like co-conspirators in his madness. Hence, we're not just watching, we're participating. And in a world where entertainment often pretends to be something it's not, that honesty is magnetic. This makes him wildly relatable to younger audiences raised on Tumblr, Reddit, and Twitter. He speaks their language and doesn't deliver monologues about justice. In short, Deadpool is the first anti-hero designed for the TikTok generation. Underneath the sarcasm, however, lies something deeper. Deadpool may not be brooding like Batman or morally tortured like Walter White, but he is in pain. He's a man disfigured, abandoned, and constantly in physical agony. His body is a prison, his past is a graveyard, and instead of weeping about it, he turns his trauma into punchlines. This gives him a tragic depth that sneaks up on you. One minute you're laughing at a joke, the next minute he's cradling a dying loved one or standing in the rain, utterly alone. This whiplash between absurdity and heartbreak is part of the magic. Deadpool weaponizes his pain with humor, and that makes him strangely inspiring. At the end of the day, he might be a loudmouth assassin with a bad attitude, but he also has a code. He protects kids, he fights for love, he risks everything for people he cares about, and of course, he'll shoot a guy in the face while doing it with the intention is there. It's this beating heart beneath the chaos that makes us forgive him, because even when he's at his worst, he's never soulless. He's just a mess trying to be perfect. And sometimes, in a world filled with pressure to be perfect, the loudest, bloodiest, funniest mess in the room is the one we cheer for the most. Just like Walter White, it's easy to say he became a fan favorite because of his complexity or the genius writing, but that's not the full picture. This doesn't explain why people were putting Heisenberg decals on their cars, quoting "Say my name," and defending a man who was poisoning children, manipulating friends, and getting more people killed than a small civil war. The Walter White effect is something far deeper and more disturbing than intellectual admiration. We didn't root for Walt because he was a great character. We rooted for him because deep down, we all know him. He's the everyman's monster, the polite demon in khakis. The quiet fury we bury inside until it finally explodes. And watching Walter White burn down his old life felt tragic. There's something undeniably addictive about transformation. It's why we watch makeover videos, before and after weight loss journeys, and origin stories of superheroes. It's the narrative equivalent of emotional crack, watching someone evolve. And Breaking Bad didn't just show a transformation, it weaponized it. We met Walter White as a schlubby chemistry teacher with a death sentence and a $3 car wash salary. He was ignored, dismissed, humiliated. The kind of guy who blends into a crowd. Kind of man the world steps over and then he changes in a painful way. First, it's just about paying for cancer treatment. Then it's about providing for his family. Then it's about ego. Then it's about power. And finally, it's about nothing but himself. Let's be honest, Breaking Bad is a revenge story about wearing a lab coat, not against one person, but against an entire life. Walter's a man who plays by the rules. He was a genius who never got credit, a father who couldn't provide, a teacher treated like garbage. He bit his tongue for decades and then life finally cornered him. He didn't just bite back. He devoured everything. That quiet rage is that resentment toward bosses, coworkers, spouses, former friends, and society. That's what simmers under Walter's story. He's punishing the world for underestimating him, and who among us hasn't fantasized in our darkest, pettiest moments about breaking the rules and finally being seen? Walter doesn't just build an empire, he shoves it in the face of everyone who doubted him. Every move he makes is fueled by revenge, and watching it unfold feels disturbingly satisfying. One of the strangest things about Walter White is that his villainy doesn't feel handed to him, it feels earned. Most villains come out of nowhere. They're bad for the sake of plot, but Walt built his empire one brick at a time. We watched him struggle, bleed, sacrifice, compromise, and claw his way into power. Every sin had a purpose, every lie had a reason, and even when we hated what he became, we respected how he got there. In other words, we watched him work for it. There's a grim satisfaction in that, and because we were along for every moral compromise, we didn't feel shocked when he crossed the line. We felt invested. In a twisted way, it's like watching someone climb Everest, but instead of a summit, he reached a drug throne. Here's the darkest truth of the Walter White effect. He's terrifying because he feels familiar. He's the guy next door, and that's what makes him so compelling. He isn't a mobster. He isn't a mutant or billionaire vigilante. He's just who got tired of being invisible. For most of the show, he outsmarts everyone. DEA agents, cartel bosses, rival dealers, his own family. And there's something undeniably attractive about that kind of power. Not brute force, but intelligence. We don't admire what he does, but we're often in awe of how he does it. We respect the game even if we hate the player. And as long as he's 3 moves ahead, we keep watching. And here's the twist that makes Breaking Bad a masterpiece. Walter White isn't meant to be your hero. He's meant to be your reflection. At the very end of Breaking Bad, Walter White finally tells the truth. He sits across from his wife and admits what we knew all along, that he did everything for himself and really like it. He even felt it was extremely good, and even in that moment, we didn't boo him. We didn't reject him. We understood him. And for most of the show, he wins. He outsmarts the DEA, he breaks rival cartels, he maneuvers his family like chess pieces, he manipulates Jesse like a father who never had boundaries, he doesn't rely on fists, he uses his mind. His power is intelligence, and there's something undeniably attractive about watching someone so often dismissed become the most dangerous man in the room. Take the scene in the season finale when Gus Fring walks into Hector Salamanca's room thinking he's in control, but Walt has outplayed him. He's turned a man in a wheelchair into a bomb. The moment Gus walks out of the room with half his face missing is the moment we realize Walter didn't just win. He orchestrated a symphony of destruction. Walter White is the monster who started as a man, the villain who wore a wedding ring, and we walked with him, step by step, into the abyss. And maybe, just maybe, we liked it too.